Yo, how's it going everybody? Swagkage here, and welcome to today's video, a follow-up to a video I posted 2 weeks ago talking about Nen and all of its mechanics. For those of you who watched it, you know that there was no way for me to condense Hatsu into that video because it just would have taken way too long. The video would have been like 40 minutes, so if you want to watch the first one, links in the description as always. But for those of you who have already seen it or just don't care, let's just go ahead and get started. So the information in the first video may have given you the impression that Nen is something that works universally the same for everybody who tries to learn it. And while that does hold true for most of its mechanics, Hatsu turns Nen from a basic power system without much variety to something that's incredibly personalized and varies greatly from person to person. Hatsu is the name given to a person's unique personal Nen ability. It's something that they have complete control over since they're able to create it themselves, and in doing so, they're able to establish individual rules, mechanics, and restrictions for this power. More on that later, though. Similar to the chakra natures present in Naruto, in Hunter x Hunter there exist 6 different aura types that a person can have an affinity for. Unlike in Naruto, a person can only have one affinity at a time, and they're generally not able to master skills based outside of their affinitive class. These 6 aura types are Enhancement, Emission, Transmutation, Manipulation, Conjuration, and Specialization. Each one generally does what you'd think it does. Enhancement powers typically seek to enhance something in some way, etc., but there are a few powers that seem to be a bit confusing. Some Hatsu that don't seem like they belong to the aura type they're based on, which has resulted in a bit of confusion among the members of the Hunter x Hunter community, but this isn't too terribly common. Like the chakra-sensitive paper test a person can take in Naruto, there exists a test in Hunter x Hunter that a person can take in order to discover the class that their aura belongs to. Now, it seems like more than one method of doing this exists because the process I'm about to speak of is considered the most popular way of discovering one's aura type, but none of the others are explored over the course of the series. Most aspiring hunters use water divination to find their aura type. A simple process where a person fills up a wine glass with water, lays a leaf on top of it, performs Ren on the glass, and waits to see the effects. If the person being tested is an enhancer, the volume of the water in the glass will change. In Gon's case, this caused the glass to begin overflowing, but Wing doesn't specify if it's possible for any other changes to occur. Like, for instance, if the amount of water in the glass could decrease instead. Anyway, like I mentioned earlier, the names of most of the aura types are more or less self-explanatory, so unsurprisingly, the art of enhancement involves using one's aura to, well, enhance stuff. Typically, enhancers focus on augmenting the abilities of their own body, but it's possible to increase the power of objects by using Shu as well. Enhancement is by far the simplest of the 6 aura types, as the Hatsu that draw from it all generally set out to do the same thing. Most enhancers focus on developing a power that aids them in basic hand-to-hand combat by boosting one or more of their physical attributes, and there are few examples of any that attempt to deviate from this. Gon, Uvogin, Finks, Netero, and Yuppie are all examples of enhancers, and they all have one thing in common: they're extremely good with their fists. If the person being tested is a manipulator, the leaf placed atop the water will begin to move. The art of manipulation involves exercising control over objects and even other people in ways specified by the user when they create their power. Unlike the name suggests, manipulation abilities don't focus on the manipulation of one's aura, though this is obviously still a component as it is with all 6 aura types. They're usually built around the goal of transmitting the user's aura through another entity and using the target in question as a catalyst of the user's Nen in order to control that target by giving commands to their aura. If the person being tested is a transmuter, they'll cause the water to experience a change in taste. The art of transmutation involves, well, transmuting one's aura, or in other words, changing the properties of it to mimic those of another substance. In some cases, there appears to be a fine line between the abilities of a transmuter and those of a conjurer due to the similarities between both aura types. For example, one may assume Killua's ability to summon lightning is a conjuration ability, but it is actually the result of his altering his aura so that it adopts the properties of electricity. If the person being tested is a conjurer, what the manga refers to as impurities will appear within the water. The art of conjuration is, like enhancement, very self-explanatory and simply involves the conjuration of a material object using one's aura. Conjuration, at face value, appears to be the most limited of the 6 aura types, as according to Kurapika's mentor, Izunavi, it is impossible to conjure anything overly supernatural, or in Kurapika's words, anything that is beyond human capacity. An obvious example of something that cannot be conjured, a sword that can cut through anything, is presented in the same explanation, and Izunavi further elaborates by saying that while it is possible to conjure a sharp, durable sword that one can further enhance with Nen, there's no real benefit to doing that over just buying a real sword. So this is all to say that conjurers are forced to be very creative to come up with an effective power, ideally one that lies between the boundaries of mundane and overly supernatural described by Izunavi. If the person being tested is an emitter, the water will experience a shift in color. The art of emission involves shooting out or projecting one's aura in a variety of different ways, which is done by separating the aura from the body it originates from. This usually causes the aura being projected to rapidly decrease in intensity. However, those well-trained in Emission are capable of overcoming this weakness and are capable of separating their aura from their body for extended periods and across long distances without consequence. Though it can be effectively employed by itself, Emission is also frequently used alongside Transmutation and Enhancement in order to preserve the effects of an ability built by using one of the latter two aura types after the aura used to construct them has been separated from the user's body. General applications of Emission are Hunter x Hunter's version of what I like to call Dragon Ball Z attacks, where a person fires one or more energy constructs using their nen. In simple terms, it's basically just the ability to shoot out laser blasts or energy balls. Emission seems to be quite a bit more complicated than it appears on the surface, however. Leorio, an emitter, can create portals with his Hatsu, and one emitter from Razor's Greed Island team has the power to teleport his body parts. Finally, if the person being tested is a specialist, something completely different will happen. For example, in Piru's case, the leaf atop the water completely disintegrated. Anything that falls under the specialization category is simply something that doesn't belong to any of the other five. The limits and boundaries of this aura type are never really specified or explored, but specialists are capable of doing a whole bunch of stuff. Neon Nostrad's power allows her to tell people their future in the form of a poem, and Krollo's power lets him steal other people's Hatsu. This isn't true of any of the other categories, but it is possible for somebody to become a specialist later in life, even if they weren't born with an affinity for the aura type, and this most often happens in the cases of manipulators and conjurers, both of which have a 1% chance of doing so. So now that I've covered all of the aura types, let's move on to the actual process of creating one's power. Now, there's a lot to take in here, so make sure you pay close attention. Like, seriously, from here on out, it gets a little bit complicated. Now, like I said, everybody in the world of Hunter x Hunter is born with an affinity for one of the 6 aura types, though the degree to which they can master each depends on the aura type they were already born with. Let's take a look at the graph of all of the aura types so that I can provide an example. We'll look at Gon for this one. Since Gon was born with an affinity for Enhancement, he's capable of using Enhancement techniques at 100% efficiency. Since Emission and Transmutation both border Enhancement on this graph, Gon could use both of them with 80% efficiency. Then he could use the remaining two, Manipulation and Conjuration, with 60% efficiency. Normally, he'd be able to use Specialization, the aura type opposite from his on the graph, with 40% efficiency. However, it's impossible for anybody to learn specialist abilities unless A, that's their affinitive aura type, or B, they develop an affinity for it at a later point in their life. The same sort of structure applies to anybody with an affinity for any of the other 5 aura types. They'll be able to use the 2 aura types that bordered theirs on the graph, with the exception of Specialization, of course, with 80% efficiency, the one opposite from theirs with 40% efficiency, and the 2 that are left with 60. This all means that it's possible to use multiple aura types at once, which is crucial when creating a Hatsu. Now, before any of this is directly explained, Wing tells Gon, Killua, and Zushi, when creating one's power, to make sure to primarily focus on your aura type. He used both Guido and Castro as examples of what not to do when creating your power. Guido because he attempted to use manipulation abilities alongside enhancement abilities at the core of his power, 2 aura types that aren't particularly compatible with one another, and Castro because he chose to create a clone, something he had to both conjure and manipulate despite his affinity for enhancement. Now, this isn't to say that nobody should ever branch out into other aura types, because they definitely should, but the point that Wing was trying to get across to his 3 students was that it's best to pour most of one's focus into their affinitive aura type and spend most of their remaining time developing their potential skills with the 2 classes that border theirs. Enhancers are best suited to incorporating Emission and Transmutation into their Hatsu, Transmuters are best off incorporating Enhancement and Conjuration into their Hatsu, and so on and so forth. In order to best take advantage of their skills with other aura types, it's also possible for any Nen user to create multiple variants of their Hatsu. A really simple and easy to understand example of this is Gon's Jajanken ability. The gimmick of the ability is that it can be used in 3 different ways, and it's meant to keep the opponent guessing until Gon announces which of the 3 he plans to employ. Rock is a supercharged punch attack that relies primarily on enhancement. Scissors takes the form of a deadly, incredibly sharp blade of Nen that relies on transmutation to work, and Paper is an emission-based attack where Gon launches his aura in the form of a projectile. On the subject of Jajanken, the series also points out on multiple occasions that most Nen abilities are based on one's own personality. Personal character is integral to the creation of one's Hatsu, and as such, a person's ability typically reflects who they are. I'll go into more detail about how this works on a person-to-person basis when I start making videos about individual Nen powers, but for now, I'll just continue to use Gon as an example. The fact that Gon's ability is built around rock, paper, scissors is said to be a reflection of his childish nature and his love of games. Of course, there are plenty of Nen powers that make far more complex statements about the person using them, such as Krollo's ability to steal powers being a sign that he can't find an identity of his own. But like like I said, I'll explore this aspect of Nen more when I make videos about certain powers on their own. One last thing that I want to touch on, but not explore heavily in this video, is the idea of Nen restrictions. This is a Nen mechanic that I interpret as Togashi's attempt to introduce a very easy to use and incredibly versatile balancing tool to his power system. Nen restrictions basically allow a person to make some aspects of their Hatsu weaker in exchange for making the rest of them stronger. In other words, they can place self-imposed restrictions on their power, like for instance not being able to use it against certain people, or only being able to use it properly after a certain amount of conditions have been fulfilled, that sort of thing, in order to strengthen all of the areas of the power that these restrictions don't affect. The reason this works is because, as I just explained, Nen is tied very heavily to one's character. Self-imposed restrictions serve as a sign of one's willpower, and strengthening a person's will in turn makes that person's Nen stronger as well. Kurapika is by far the best example to use when explaining this, as he made some of the core functions of his power completely unusable against anyone that wasn't a member of the Phantom Troop, but this in turn made him pretty much unstoppable when fighting any of the members of the Spider. There aren't many examples of Nen restrictions that are this extreme scattered throughout the series, but this is definitely the best way to communicate what I'm talking about. Now, this is where I'm going to cut today's video off. Don't worry, I do plan on making a third Nen video going into detail about all of the really complicated stuff, particularly the aura power concept that Knuckle introduced to the audience. I'm sure at least a handful of you are wondering why I didn't at least mention that in this video, but don't worry, just sit tight. A video covering all that stuff is coming. But in the meantime, I think I have something to hold you over. Verve was kind enough to sponsor this video, and in case you haven't heard yet, it's a pretty cool streaming service that acts as a hub for a bunch of other streaming services like RiffTrax, Machinima, Rooster Teeth, and my two personal favorites, Crunchyroll and Funimation. Across these last two, you can watch pretty much any anime you can think of, either subbed on Crunchyroll or dubbed on Funimation. This includes, of course, Hunter x Hunter and a bunch of others like Dragon Ball Super, My Hero Academia, Naruto, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yu Yu Hakusho, Cowboy Bebop, you name it. For those of you who like Western animation, Bravest Warrior Season 4 just got added to Verve's catalog as well, so it's all pretty cool stuff. If you click the link in the description, you'll get a free, ad-free 30-day trial of Verve Premium, and that'll get you access to everything I just mentioned for a whole month. You can catch up on anything you feel like you're behind on, start watching something your friends are recommending to you, whatever. And even if you think you're going to be busy for the next month, like say you're traveling a lot or whatever, don't worry, Verve's got you covered. You can watch everything on the app, even without an internet connection. So if you find yourself on a bus traveling through somewhere where you have no cell service, you can feel free to pull out your phone and start watching some Naruto. It's pretty great. So like I said, click the link in the description. It'd help me out a lot, and you'd get yourself some free anime. No real negatives in the equation. And if you don't like Verve, you can just feel free to cancel at any time. Anyway, thanks a bunch for watching the video all the way to the end. Appreciate it as always. Let me know in the comments if you have anything you want me to make a video on in the future. And until next time, I'll talk to you later. Swagkage out. Bye.